All right. Thank you all for tuning in to WJC 98.3 FM, your voice, your music, your station. My name is Jeff Badu, and I'm a licensed certified public accountant here in the state of Illinois. I'm also a wealth multiplier and a serial entrepreneur of the firm Badu Enterprises, LLC, which is a multinational conglomerate in the financial industry. And we provide a lot of different financial services, mainly tax services. That's what we really specialize on. So today we have a very, very special guest on the show. A good friend of mine, Mr. Donald Kiolbassa. How's it going, Don?
What's up, buddy?
Nothing much, man. Just living a dream,
God bless you. Good for you, man. Good for you.
Absolutely. So we'll have Don on in a second. The way the show is going to go, as usual, I'm going to give a market report, and then I'll also, I'll give a market report, and then ultimately I'll introduce the speaker, and then we'll just get right into it. As usual, if you have a question, please feel free to dial into the studio line, 773-942-7167. You can also, we're streaming live on Facebook. So if you go on my Facebook Live, you'll find a segment which will also ultimately be on my website, my social media, and all that good stuff. I'll be sharing Don's information. But let's get right into it. So market report as of March 8, 2019, so as of last Friday. So the benchmark indexes essentially suffered their worst showing last week since December. Hardest hit was the Russell 2000, which fell over 4%. Essentially what happened was that we had some unsettling global economic news, which had investors scrambling for cover for stocks. So investors were very nervous because of the global economic environment that we had. The prospects of a trade deal with China, we were supposed to have a trade deal with China, suddenly took a turn for the worse after several weeks of promising rhetoric. And then also adding to the turmoil was last Thursday's decision by the European Central Bank to offer additional stimulus to spur economic activity in the European Union. In addition, Chinese exports fell and U.S. job growth was marginal at best in February. All of the factors essentially led to a fear that the economy may be slowing down, which always fears investors a little bit. While stock prices dropped, long-term bond prices rose as usual. There's always an inverse relationship with that. Or not always, but in most cases there's an inverse relationship with that. And also the price of gold did rise. So overall, price of crude oil went up $55.74 per barrel to $55.99, so not too much of a change. The price of COMEX gold went up from $12.94.20 to $12.98.70. So that's ultimately what happened with that. And then as far as what's happened in the market so far, the Dow Jones is up 9% year to date. NASDAQ is 11.65% up. S&P 500 is up 9.42%. Russell 2000, 12.85%. And then you have the global Dow, which is up 7.46%. With that being said, we'll go into the presentation. We have a very special guest on the show tonight, Mr. Donald Kiolbassa, he's truly a legend, to say the least. So Donald,
I don't know about that. Or infamous.
Absolutely. So Donald, who's short, goes by Don. Don is a sought-after public speaker. He has presented hundreds of presentations all over the country. He is a dynamic and engaging speaker, entertaining audiences of 50 to thousands. Don was a gold medalist for the 2008 United States Wushu team. Wushu translates to Chinese martial arts. After winning gold, he caught the attention of Warner Brothers, or Warner Bros. For short, games, and is the martial arts motion capture model in some of the biggest action video games in history, including Mortal Kombat. He's basically the animated, or he's the motion character for Scorpion and Sub-Zero, and Injustice, which is Batman and Flash. Don is also the author of Discover Your Dragon, or of the Discover Your Dragon series, which translates martial arts principles for character development and strategy. Discover Your Dragon is required reading in several schools across the country. And on top of that, just to give you a little bit more background into the technicalities or the more specifics, Don is an Illinois licensed attorney and certified public accountant, or CPA, with a focus on real estate law, corporate law, estate planning, and tax law. Over the past 12 years as an attorney, Don has managed thousands of commercial and residential real estate transactions. Today, Don is one of the top producing attorneys in Chicago, averaging more than 500 real estate transactions a year. Prior to becoming an attorney, Don worked as a CPA with Big Four public accounting firm KPMG LLP. Don speaks and teaches on a variety of subject matter, including real estate law and tax law. I mean, that's quite the resume, Don. Man.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So, thank you once again, Don, for tuning in or for joining our show today. It's an honor and a blessing to be able to have somebody with your level of expertise and to be able to share with our listeners today. I'm pretty sure our listeners will have a very, very strong, positive outlook on this. I mean, we're going to give you guys some really good advice. Now, really quickly, Don, I wanted to ask you, what's your current hourly rate?
My current hourly rate is $300 an hour.
$300 an hour. So you guys are about to get basically free advice at a rate of $300 an hour. So if this is not worth anything, it's at least worth $300. So,
God bless you, right?
Exactly. So with that, we'll be covering some topics. We'll be talking about different types of entities that you might want to consider. Now, Don will probably put a disclaimer out there, but remember, we're not giving legal advice. Nobody, this is not a paid thing. You can't. Just a disclaimer. This is not.
This is educational.
Exactly. It's for educational purposes and information purposes only. We are not giving legal or even tax advice on air today. And I know, dealing with an attorney now, it's very important to get all your, cross all your T's, dot all your I's when it comes to that. But we'll be talking about asset protection. That's the segment of today. We'll be talking about different ways to protect your entities or different ways to protect your assets using entities and also trusts, for example, land trusts. Don will also be sharing some best practices that, perhaps he uses for his asset protection. And then I'll also chime in on some things. Now, one thing I would like to say, I am not an attorney. I am a CPA, but I'm not an attorney. Don is the attorney. So please listen to him. So with that being said, let's get right into the presentation. Don, thank you for joining. It's truly an honor to have you, man. All good,
man. All good.
Absolutely.
So tell me, ask me if you have any questions.
Yeah. So, and with that too, just a disclaimer, or not a disclaimer, but just some housekeeping. If you do have a question, you can call into the studio line 773-942-7167. Once again, 773-942-7167. Or you can also post your question directly on our Facebook Live. You can find me on Facebook at Jeff Badu. It's streaming live right now on Facebook. So the main theme of this is really Q&A format. So we're going to ask Don a set of questions, and he's going to provide the best answers possible, as he is certainly the best attorney that I've ever worked with in my life. And just so you guys know, Don is also my attorney. So really quickly, Don, what are some of the different types of entities that are out there? I mean, how if somebody's looking to start a business or just looking to add some protection, what sort of entities are out there that's possible?
Okay, so let's start from the very beginning, right? Mm-hmm. Like new guy comes to, well, here, let's take a step back. Take a step back, guys. We live in the greatest country in the world, in my opinion. And one of the great things about our country is the opportunity for entrepreneurs. Guys, the rules, in my opinion, are really written for the mega wealthy, the entrepreneurial spirit, and landowners. When you're out there, it's easy to go out there and create a side hustle nowadays. Get out there and make something. If you got your W-2 job, God bless you. Keep it up. That's amazing. But chip at it. Start. It took me 12 years to take my side hustle to a full-time business. 12 years. And I didn't start making money until the 6th year. So, it takes a while. So let's start from the very beginning. Somebody goes up to Jeff Badu and says, Jeff, I want to start up a side hustle. Like, I want to have a business selling hot dogs. So what Jeff's going to tell you to do is, like, in the very beginning, you don't got any money. So you might not want to spend all this money on, like, tax consulting, legal consulting, setting up an entity. So Jeff's going to tell you to just operate as a sole proprietor, keep all your bank records and all your receipts, and show it to him at the end of the year. Then when he files your 1040, he's going to put it on your Schedule C. That's a sole proprietor. Let's say after 6 years of being a sole proprietor, you got a full-time job, you're slinging hot dogs during your lunch break. After like 6 years, you build it up, and all of a sudden you're making over $100,000. Then Jeff's going to sit you down, and he's going to ask you to become an S corp or an LLC. Check the box. Now, when you become an S corp, one of the things he's going to tell you is there's some liability protection. So if someone tries to sue you while you're selling hot dogs, they can't go after your personal assets. After about 12 years, the S corp by itself, the model will start breaking down on you. So you're going to have to diversify and start, possibly, investing into equipment that you'll own in LLCs. So it kind of, it will grow throughout your career. And there's all kinds of cool ways out there that the rules will protect you. For example, Jeff, I know you're a single guy, but one day you hope to get married, right?
Absolutely.
Do you know on your principal residence in Illinois, if you're married and if you hold the title as tenants by the entirety, an individual creditor cannot foreclose on your property unless both you and your spouse are liable to that creditor.
So you're telling me I need to get married?
If you get married and you own it in a principal residence, then the creditor cannot foreclose on you, right? So it's a huge protection that the state gives married couples to your property. In addition, retirement. You want to really load up your retirement fund because in the state of Illinois, judgments can't attach. And in addition, if you file for bankruptcy, there's certain protections against the retirement funds, right? And I know you run around and you tell all your clients about like building up those retirement funds. Now let's take it a step further. You went from a side hustle, sole proprietor, you built yourself up to an S corp, you started doing amazing, then you started buying appreciable assets for LLCs, and now you really want to start protecting some of those things. Well, you got your basic protection, the tenancy by the entirety. You got your retirement fund. That's also a protection. But let's pretend you really just started killing it. Do you know that there's other entities out there and trusts that you might be able to put your assets into to create some sort of protection from creditors? Jeff, what are you seeing out there right now?
I would say, as far as the most popular entity choice, I'd say LLC, limited liability company, is definitely the most popular.
Okay, I agree with that. And well, here, if I were like coming up to you, I was a new business, right? Is there anything advice that you would give me that was different than what I just told you?
I would say probably not. For me, I like the asset protection to get started as early as possible, because even if you have a hot dog stand and it's not, let's say it's making money and it's a side hustle, and and let's just say somebody somehow eats a hot dog, gets poisoned, and they sue you for $1 million.
Okay, that's a problem. That sucks.
Exactly.
Yep.
Technically, if you don't have a lot, then you don't have a lot to give, but there's probably something valuable that you may have that person is probably trying to go after.
I agree with that. It is probably better to, incorporate right away. My only pushback is, sometimes entrepreneurs, they're really bootstrapping things in the very beginning. Boy, I tell you, my first year when I started my business, I did not make a lot of money. And like every nickel, counted for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, when I started, as time went on and I started like, getting better and better, and, I got to a much more comfortable place, with finances, all of a sudden I was in a different position when I could, actually, afford things. But boy, I tell you, those first couple of months, man, that was a struggle for me to make it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing. I started my entrepreneurship journey full time at least. I used to work at PwC or PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I left
Hmm.
the company back in 2016 in September. And I
Okay.
started grinding. I started hustling. I started driving Uber for a little bit. That's how my car rental business came about. I started tutoring. I started doing everything. And while I was doing that, I was building my business plan. So I'd work about 20 hours a week doing the Uber and the income stuff. But then I was building a business plan to get ready for tax season because I knew, I had September until January for tax season to start. And
Hmm.
in January, people weren't walking in the door. So I got scared. Luckily, I know now that people don't really walk in the door until February because,
Yeah.
the filing doesn't actually even start until, end of January. So
Gotcha.
with that, I mean, my first year in business, I wouldn't say it was a struggle per se, but at least the first few months they were very nerve wracking because you would wake up, you didn't know where your income would come from, you didn't know where your paycheck would come from. Had a mortgage, it's not like I had kids or a wife or anything like that, but it was still
Hmm.
pretty nerve wracking when you live in a certain lifestyle, and then all of a sudden you have to put it on pause a little bit, just temporarily until clients started walking in the door. So for me, I took a risk, but it was a calculated risk because I actually went into tax season with 100 clients already pre-existing. You know,
Oh, wow. Good for you.
yeah,
I,
absolutely. So for me, I incorporated right. Well, I take that back. It took me 6 years to actually incorporate my business because I started the plan in 2010, and I didn't put it
hmm.
into effect until 2016. That's when I formed my LLC. So from 2010 to 2016, I was basically doing taxes on the side. So you are right. But if I knew, I mean, then again, with PwC laws and everything like that and rules and all that, I probably wouldn't have been able to incorporate anyway. So,
Yeah.
but I still think that when we're in such a litigious environment, I mean, just lawsuit. I mean, I've been sued before. I mean, I'm not afraid to admit that. I've been sued before. I've never lost a lawsuit though. But people are just so litigious. Any little thing, they'll try to sue you for it. So with that being said, especially if you have like, for me, I had certain assets at the time, back in the day too. So that's why for me it's very critical. And I understand most people when they're building, they don't really have a lot.
Yep.
So I think it ultimately depends on the person. I think that's what it comes down to. But I'm a big proponent of, hey, $150 get your LLC. I mean, you're doing a DBA or anything anyway. It's going to cost you like 75 to 100. You might as well go the full LLC route. Establish business credit early, some history early, and then ultimately run your business. But you always want to check with your company to see if it's even allowed for you to have a side business or not.
Gotcha. And I respect that. I just, for me, I
Mm-hmm.
just remember those first couple of months, how terrible they were
Yeah.
trying to make ends meet, right? And, you're right. So everybody out there, the best answer is this. The best answer is for you to go out and to, incorporate, go incorporate, go do all those things. That is the right answer, right?
Absolutely.
With that said, like I said, I do remember my life,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, developing and stuff like that, and just really barely being able to make, everything connect.
Mm.
And once I was able to do that, I was able to, I was in a much better place.
Mm-hmm.
But for the first couple of years, I was barely keeping the lights on.
Mm.
So for those of you who are, might be like me, you can still have a side hustle without incorporating, but you should incorporate it if you can.
Absolutely. So with that being said, what just really quickly, like what are the different? So let's say somebody is ready to incorporate.
Hmm.
What are the different options that they have?
Well, if you're going to do let's pretend you're going to do something with appreciable property.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's you almost have to put that in an LLC. You don't want to put appreciable property in S corps. There's all kinds of reasons for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in addition, like, it depends who your CPA is. Like, sit down and guys, I mean this. Stop with the TurboTax stuff, guys. Now, some people will say that TurboTax is, it's a little bit more easier because you can spend $49.99 to file your own return. But guys, filing the return is not really that difficult. The reason why you hire a CPA is so you can build a relationship with that person. You can sit down, and with the right CPA, when you sit down with that person, they coach you through it. You know what I mean? They tell you, hey, this is what you should be doing. This is what, how you should grow, right? Build that relationship with a CPA, whoever it is. And it's just so critically important. Sorry I go on that tangent, but the answer is some CPAs, like myself, I like S corps for operations, and I like LLCs when I'm holding assets. Now, not every CPA thinks that way. Some CPAs, they just do things however, they prefer an LLC with a check-the-box S corp status, right? Mm-hmm. I like S corps for my own personal reasons. So I tell people, sit down with your CPA, build a relationship. Let's get back to that. Because if you're just processing your tax return, if you do something wrong, or if you're doing stuff wrong, there's no one looking over your shoulder to make sure, to give you a heads up that, hey, you might want to think about doing this differently.
Exactly. Cool. So that's just so we all caught that, just to recap. Don likes S corporations for your active or operations business. When he says operations, this is like your day job or your business that you do mainly. For example, I'm a tax professional. I'm a CPA. I have a limited liability company that's taxed as an S corp. But Don would say, if it was up to him, if he was advising a client, he would say go to just the regular S corp route. For different reasons. But when you have an S corporation, there's things you have to do, such as board meetings, which you can very well go to Vegas for your board meeting. I mean, nothing wrong with that. Go to Bahamas, go to Ghana, wherever. Yep. You have to have a stock certificate. You have to have bylaws, and you have to file your annual report every single year. So all these things need to be in place, and it's very, very critical that you have these things set up. And so I think, it's very great advice. And then here's a big reason why you want to go S corp. A thing called FICA, or self-employment taxes, the 15.6% or so extra tax that they hit you on when you're self-employed, or when you have a sole proprietorship or an LLC tax as a sole proprietorship. So Don, what income threshold would you say let's say somebody is an LLC or they're just starting out, what would you say would be a good income threshold for them to start converting to that whole S corp route?
I know you and I might go back and forth on this. I think you think the number is 80 or something like that.
40K.
Yeah. I really like something to be like in the hundreds, like 100, 120.
Got it.
Just because there's, they got to deal with a separate return. Mm-hmm. They got to deal with ADP. They got to deal with, or a payroll company. They got to deal with me. Mm-hmm. If you're doing like money like that, then you should separate. You should become an S corp.
Now, is that 100K gross or 100K net?
100K gross, 60 net.
Got it. Okay.
Something like that. That's where I think it really starts making sense. And like, I get it. Like, you could probably save them some money, with your way. But I just, my way, it's the way I've been programmed.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So to transition now, you'll hear a lot about, LLCs, C corps, S corps. and all of that. Oh yeah, really quickly, what's your opinion on C corps?
Man, they were like really out of favor for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But with the tax cuts, you know, with family businesses were almost always told, hey, LLC, LLC. But now with the tax cuts and the way you can structure certain things, there are some examples where C corps actually work now.
Got it. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So the
And I've
transition.
never said that ever. Until now.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't blame you for that. So
Yeah.
to really quickly transition, so we just talked about entities. Now I think this is what can truly change a person's life. And Don is actually the guy that really, really made me consider trust. Trust funds, land trusts, living trust, revocable trust, irrevocable trust. I mean, I always knew what a trust was. I always knew what a trust could do. But Don really, really broke it down. And I think if you can use your example with the whole real estate, I think it will help our viewers a lot. But Don, what about trust? Like, how should people set themselves up to a point where they're O.J. Simpson, bulletproof type protection, land trust?
Well, what he did that was really unique is Florida is like a debtor's heaven. So, for example, they run. Remember, I told you that tenancy by the entirety rule if you're married.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Illinois, you can only do that in your principal residence. In Florida, it's much more expansive. You can do it bank accounts, houses, cars, everything, right? Mm. In addition, they have really strong protections for your principal residence. Mm-hmm. And it's just Florida, if you're in an extremely high-risk industry, Florida's kind of the place to be.
Okay.
Now, that was OJ, right? Now, there are protections in Illinois, but they're nowhere near Florida. But there are some asset protection vehicles we have here. For example, a land trust. Mm-hmm. A land trust offers a certain amount of asset protection. Jeff, what a land trust is, it's a trust that owns a piece of property that you, Jeff, would be the beneficial owner of. Mm. Jeff, if you were driving a car and you hit me, right? Mm-hmm. Do you own the trust?
I would say.
Or do you own the real estate?
No, I do not own the real estate.
So they can't. You only own a beneficial interest of the trust, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't own the real estate. So when they try to attach a judgment, they can't, and they try to attach a judgment against the property. Well, it doesn't work that way because you don't own it. Mm-hmm. Now, a savvy litigator who understands collection will know that there's a workaround to that, but not everyone is savvy enough to catch the solution to that. And I'm not going to give it on the air, so we don't give the answer to everybody. Right. But essentially, it's a great way to add a layer of protection to you. It also, on the public records, when people try to look you up, they won't see your name. They'll only see the trust number.
Got it. So it's true so basically what you're saying is that a land trust ultimately offers you protection in the fact that you cannot attach a judgment to a land trust, at least in the state of Illinois. And then also the fact that you have privacy. Does that sound right?
That is true. Now, there is a workaround to the attachment of the judgment, right? But we're not going to give that open
absolutely.
Line. I'll tell you offline what the workaround is.
Yeah, we need to talk.
There is a workaround for people, like if they needed to eventually get to your assets, but not every litigator is sharp enough to catch it.
Got it. Okay. So you would definitely recommend land trusts when it comes to owning real estate?
I love land trusts. The only problem is sometimes lenders push back because a lot of lenders are not educated on land trusts. Mm-hmm. But I love land trusts. If I could, I would have every one of my clients own their property in a land trust.
Now talking on that topic, can a lender foreclose on your home if it's in a land trust?
Oh man, now you're going to get complicated. So, do you know? Okay, let's say you own your house in a land trust. Mm-hmm. Do you own real estate?
I do not own real estate.
No, you own personal property. You own a beneficial interest, which is personal property. Can you foreclose on personal property?
Not necessarily. You can foreclose on real property, but not necessarily personal property.
Do you understand the difference?
Yes, I do.
So it's tougher to foreclose on that. There's other workarounds, but I don't want to give out the secrets.
Oh yeah.
Yes, but it's much more difficult for a lender to foreclose. That's why a lot of lenders push back on it.
Got it. Well, thank you, Don. That's definitely great stuff. And once again, just some housekeeping items. If you're tuning in, welcome to WGHT 98.3 FM, your voice, your music, your station. This is Money Talks, where we only talk money. If you do have a question, please feel free to call into the studio. Studio number is 773-942-7167. Once again, 773-942-7167. You can also catch us live on Facebook. We're streaming right now. You can find me on Facebook Live at Jeff Badu. This will be posted on my website if you need time to, catch some things. We talked about a lot of hidden gems and things like that. I didn't find out this information until I went to one of Don's presentation, and just love every time he invites me out to a presentation. I try my best to get out there. Of course, it's tax season right now, so not the best time to, get out there. But this the guest that we have on the show today is Don Kiolbassa, attorney CPA, and he's given us some very, very great advice when it comes to this whole asset protection trust. So, Don, what about some other trusts? I know you talked about the land trust for your real estate, which is awesome. I mean, me personally, that's the way that I prefer to own my real estate, although these lenders I know sometimes can give you some pushback. But what about some other trusts? What about living trusts or irrevocable trusts? What about those type of things?
So remember, trusts are amazing for distribution of assets upon your death. Like if you die, like if Jeff owns a trust, right, and you die and you've got kids, it's a great way to distribute assets. And if you use the appropriate spendthrift provision, a spendthrift provision is like a creditor protection provision for your beneficiaries, not you, your beneficiaries. There's definitely some asset protection there. However, remember, if you put in an irrevocable trust and you're still alive and it's just a standard grantor trust, there's very little asset protection, almost none. Now you can do what's called an irrevocable trust, where it is completely protected because you don't own it, right? Now, the only problem with doing those irrevocable trusts is you lose a lot of power over the asset because you have to essentially give it away.
So you're basically giving the asset to the trust, but you're taking yourself out of title or the ownership, and you're becoming the beneficial owner of the trust. Does that sound right?
That sounds very right. But which is fine for some people if they have the appropriate risk exposure. But I tell people, unless you know you're going to get sued, irrevocable trusts, they're great for insurance policies and stuff like that. But be really careful when you're using irrevocable trusts on anything else.
Got it. No, that makes sense. So, I mean, do you advise at least still having a revocable living trust though for your assets?
I think every human being should have a revocable trust. If you've got assets and kids, you should especially have it, right? But if you got anything, everyone should have a will and a trust, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say at a bare minimum, from what I know, a will, absolutely. We've heard stories time and time again. Aretha Franklin, Prince, even I think they said some famous artist or painter didn't even have at a bare minimum a will. Something that just it's so simple, and these people don't even have it. So for a fact, I would definitely advise that a person get a will. And I'm also a huge proponent when it comes to trust, not only from an asset protection standpoint, but sometimes even from a tax standpoint. Even though from a tax standpoint, if you just have a living trust, it doesn't really do a lot from a tax standpoint. It's excellent. I know for a fact for passing down assets from generation to generation, and irrevocable or irrevocable trusts. That's more when it comes to the taxes. So yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely great advice on that. Um, and I do agree that everybody, if you have kids, especially if you have kids, and if you have a spouse, you should certainly have a living trust of some sort. So I definitely appreciate the insight on that.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
cool. So with that, yeah. So let's transition a little bit now from the asset protection. I know people are probably, brains are about to explode. We talked about, the legal side, the asset protection side. We touched a little bit on taxes, but I guess what's your opinion on the whole new tax reform?
Oh man, I don't know how much trouble I'm gonna get.
I mean, just keeping it, you don't have to keep it political. Just really
Okay,
quickly. Yeah.
this is not a political. This is not a political statement.
Mm-hmm.
But I think overall it was a good thing. Like I obviously I wish they didn't do what they did with the mortgage interest and the real estate tax deduction.
Ooh, that was huge.
That was really huge. But besides that, I like a lot of what I've seen.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair enough. That's we don't want to, we certainly don't want to get you in trouble, Don. I know you're an attorney and a CPA. We don't want your license getting pulled or anything like that.
Yeah, I really strongly disagreed what they did with the real estate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But besides
from a personal standpoint, right? Not from an investor standpoint.
Well, I do think land. I do really like. I believe the American dream is for everybody to own their real estate, right?
Absolutely.
And I think you need to incentivize the ownership of real estate as much as humanly possible. Mm-hmm. Like real estate ownership has like this domino effect. It stabilizes neighborhoods. Like for people who are vested, here I'm going to give you an example. I own a piece of property, right? And the area that the property's in was raising money to build a park, right? And I cut a check, to this place for the park, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think I would cut a check to that place if I didn't own the property?
Oh, absolutely not.
Do you see what I'm saying? So I believe real estate ownership is the cornerstone of the American dream. Just my personal opinion, right?
Yeah.
And I believe we need to incentivize Americans as much as humanly possible to achieve that dream. Mm-hmm. And I think by taking that away, it was a really bad thing. I was really against it.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree that part. I think it's very important, and this stuff, for those listening, this is extremely critical. One of the key benefits of owning property or owning real estate personally, from an investment side, that didn't really change other than depreciation being accelerated and all that. But from a homeowner standpoint, this is what Don's talking about. He's talking about the personal side, so the non-business side. So from a personal side, they basically limited some deductions. For example, your state and local income and property taxes are limited to $10,000 now, which is basically pennies on a dollar if you live in a pretty expensive neighborhood. And then also, if you own, let's say, a house that costs more than $750,000, or they call it acquisition indebtedness or a loan of $750,000 or more, you're only limited to the interest on the $750,000. So that's another thing. But the big thing is also they doubled the standard deduction, which is a good and a bad thing, because it's a good thing if you don't own a home. Well, you're just getting a free $12,000 to $24,000 deduction. If you do own a home, now a lot of my clients, 90% of my clients now are not itemizing compared to last year.
Really?
Yeah, it's a very scary statistic. And they're like, wait, what? You're telling me I can't use my mortgage interest and my property taxes anymore? What's the point of me owning real estate? And I definitely don't. I don't disagree with them on saying that. So that's what Don is referring to: the fact that they've taken away, or they've taken away some of the big tax incentives of owning real estate, and so ultimately it's probably. And I gave a talk about, let's say, 2 years ago, back in 2017. At the end of 2017, we had a tax reform discussion, and I was talking to an individual who's like a board of. He's the statistician of all statisticians when it comes to taxes. And I said, well, if you're taking away mortgage interest or part of the mortgage interest and limiting the property taxes, I mean, you're probably going to see less homeowners, especially in states that have very expensive property taxes. And he was like, no, we've never seen that in history, this and that. I'm like, well, we'll see. So apparently there's statistics that prove that this whole thing doesn't really affect home ownership. But just from a logical common sense standpoint, if you're taking away basically all my tax benefits, I'm probably not going to be incentivized to own that piece of real estate on a personal side anymore. Would you agree?
I strongly agree. Yeah. It's one of those things where God, I could go into so much detail. A lot of times life has a funny way of beating you up and, knocking you to the floor, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes people, they have all these cool plans, and sometimes they go through and sometimes they don't. And for a lot of people, their piece of real estate is their last line of defense, right? Mm-hmm. The ownership of real estate. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot of gurus out there that say, hey, real estate isn't for everybody, don't own, rent. I know there are some people who say that, right? Mm-hmm. But they've never seen some of the wars that I've seen and how sometimes people, take a look at Blockbuster Video. Mm-hmm. There was a time where you would never think that would go out of business, right? And overnight, Netflix just wiped it out. Ooh. I had a close friend, not a client, just a close friend that, in 6 months, his business was completely wiped out. Wow. Completely. I mean, he was a 1%er, right? Made a really good living for himself. Mm-hmm. And somebody came out with something that literally wiped him out overnight. And the only reason why this person isn't completely destitute is he bought his house, right, that he was able to rent out later, right? He downsized or rented out the house, but his business was completely wiped out. And sometimes, it might happen to you, later in life. Yeah. You might get wiped out. And, boy, it's always really good to have that one last line of defense. You know what I mean? And you got to incentivize people to keep doing that. Because if you take that away from them and, technology is changing the way we work and function as a society.
Exactly. Now, I definitely appreciate that insight, Don. But I have one final bonus, and I think you're going to love this one. So what about Airbnb? The fact that people are paying off the mortgages with Airbnb, the mortgage interest limit doesn't affect the Airbnb, deductions and all of that. So what's your take on Airbnb? I mean, isn't it such an amazing thing?
Airbnb is really amazing. With that said, you need the right personality, right? For example, I wouldn't want, if you're Airbnb-ing, you're going to have strangers coming into your house. Oh, yeah. Right? You got to be okay with that. If you're Airbnb-ing, everyone's trying to Airbnb now, right? So I'm hearing certain Airbnb people tell me, hey, Don, I can't, no one's booking my place, right? Yeah. because now everybody got into the Airbnb game, and it's oversaturated.
That's true.
I think the answer is to, I personally never Airbnb personally.
Mm-hmm.
I love the concept, right? I am a very slow and steady investor. I like long-term tenants. I like, great school districts. That's what I go after, right? I try to, have high margin in an operation because I just didn't want to put in the footwork to do it all. I know the margins are better than what I'm getting. But now it's funny. I've got a couple of friends of mine who they're big into the Airbnb game, and they're like, Don, we've got vacancies for extended periods of time. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Because, the polar vortex came and no one's visiting Chicago.
And everywhere flooded, too.
And everywhere flooded. So, there's just too many people out there doing it. I really like long-term leases.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I would say personally, this actually impacted me, too. In January, my Airbnb basically was like ghost. It was like a ghost town.
Yeah.
Nobody was booking. We probably only had like 3 bookings the whole month. And it made sense because Airbnb came out with an email saying, hey, Airbnb is down about 20 to 40% so far this month compared to what it was last year. So you are right. That saturation is definitely huge. And, the same thing is also happening with companies like Uber. A lot of Uber drivers are like, we're not getting as many rides now because everybody wants to be an Uber driver now.
Yeah.
So it is a good point that, these new industries are coming out. However, these things do get saturated, and the next big thing is definitely going to take over. I don't think Airbnb is going to go out of business anytime soon. However, I do think that there will be other apps, perhaps. They have VBRO or all these vacation rental sites. So there is definitely some saturation.
That's my only fear, and I know a lot of people are doing it, and a lot of people are making a killing. But I'm just, I'm in a place where I'm not ready. I like slow and steady. Me personally, I like to make money in, as a lawyer, and then I like to just invest long term. But it's harder and harder to find super cash flowing properties because the purchase prices have been pushed up.
Yeah, they've been inflated like crazy. Absolutely.
Yeah, do you think are we gonna see an adjustment soon, a crash, correction?
I think we've seen a few. I mean, over the past few months, home prices have technically gone down a bit. So, I mean, I do think we are due for a huge correction pretty soon. But I'm not that fearful of it. I would say we have another 2 years or so to go. I mean, it is going to happen. I do think it is certainly going to happen. But I don't think it's going to it's not anything we have to worry about, let's say, within the next year or so. I think 2 to 5 years, we're going to have a big-time correction.
You think so?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, that's for a fact. So, and that's when we'll be buying.
Yeah, I just don't, I look at some of the, I look at some of the prices on some of these things that people are asking, and I'm literally just like, how? I'm like, where are you getting some of these numbers from? Like, it's almost to the point where, okay, I was talking to, I own a house in Chicago, right? And my wife and I, we were looking for another house that was a little bit closer to a park, like a park. And we know exactly, the 2 or 3 block radius we want to buy. Now, we tell a couple of the neighbors, hey, if anyone's ever selling in this, block, please let us know. We have, an appetite for that, right? Dude, we get a phone call from somebody, the house is sitting there vacant. And we ran our numbers on this place, right? And we really know what we're doing.
Exactly.
Right? And this place was worth $250,000 on paper, right? And we were willing to, increase that. I mean, it was a complete teardown. You don't want to live there, right? You got to rip it down to build up a house, right? but we were willing to add a little bit more if they were willing to whatchamacallit, if they were willing to let us go in, do it fast. We were willing to go up a little bit more.
Exactly.
So 250, that's what it says on paper, right? And I'm not skewing. We really did our due diligence on this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what their minimum opening bid to us was?
I couldn't guess if the world depended on
$350,000.
Holy smokes!
Because they went on Zillow, right, which is completely inaccurate, right?
Exactly.
And they went on Zillow, and they said, "Oh, our estimate says it's worth this," but it's not real because the place was tore up inside, right? You can't live there. I couldn't gut rehab it. I literally had to rip down the house and build up a new house, right?
Exactly.
It was worth $250, but people in their mind, they're trying to squeeze every nickel out of real property, even if it goes against all logic,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I there's got to be some sort of correction coming because there's no way these people are trading houses at these levels. Mm-hmm. It makes no logical sense what's happening.
Got it. All right. Thank you, Don. We definitely appreciate those words. It's always an honor to have a guest such as yourself come on the show, share some insight. Remember, Don's hourly rate is $300 an hour. You heard it live on the show. So you're getting $300 worth of free advice, basically. So, definitely thank you, Don. Now, if you do want to contact Don, you can visit him on his website, or you can visit his website at www.chicagorealestateatty.com. Once again, www.chicagorealestateatty.com. You can also email him at dhk@chicagorealestateatty.com. Phone number 773-744-9567. For all your legal needs, remember, Don is my attorney, so you're hearing it live. Don is the guy that handles the legal aspect of my life, setting up trusts, all real estate. I mean, we've closed about 4 real estate transactions in the past year or so. So we, looking to continue that momentum, and we'll be closing more and more transactions this year. So thank you, Don. It's definitely an honor to have you on the show. For those that are tuning in, once again, this is Money Talks. We thank you all for tuning in. We're out of time. So thank you all for tuning in to WGHT 98.3 FM, your voice, your music, your station. Once again, my name is Jeff Badu, and I look forward to continuously delivering you all some content. Thank you.
You're listening to WGHT 98.3 FM.
But we are nothing friend from see the first time. After dressing skin, why you get anything you like? Long as you are right, then me alright. Me know you're mad, that's why I'm alive.
Your voice, your music.
I mean, in a skirt, our jeans are short shorts. Head raised when me walk.